Hi, and welcome to the Family Justice Center Presents. We have Dr. Ricovita with us today from Southern Adventist University, and she will do a presentation on the issues college students are facing in today's world.
Thank you very much, Dina. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to chat with you a little bit and share a little bit about what do we as instructors, as faculty members, as institutions, but also what is it that the research tells us about the challenges that our students are facing today. And you know, there's much more information now that is finally starting to come out related to the pandemic and the pandemic impact on students, and not only on students, but on the population at large. And when we think about it, this is basically the context that we are living in. We already know that pre-pandemic, students have been facing a lot of health, physical health, but especially mental health challenges. We know that between 2013 and 2021, so that is kind of an 8-year span, we know that overall depression in college students has increased about 135%. That's a lot, right? We also know that anxiety has increased about 110%. And the number of students, and again, we don't know the whys. We don't know all the variables that go into these numbers, but we know that between 2013 and 2021, we know that the number of students with diagnosable mental health issues have more than doubled. So we already know that we were on a road of, ooh, something is going on. How are we going to intervene? And now the pandemic hit, right? In 2020, we all had to go home. What are some of those repercussions that we see now in college students? And at the end of the day, what is it that we can do to help, assist, or provide awareness? So thank you so very much for the invitation for this Lunch and Learn, because this is one way in which we promote awareness. We promote awareness about the challenges and the options that are out there. So I will share my screen because we are all so used to having PowerPoints, right? And images. So I do have those as well. And it's, for some of us, it's easier to listen. For some of us, it's also easier to see the information, and that's how we learn. So I will be sharing my screen and sharing some information with you as we go through this. It's also important to note that while we're looking at overall depression increasing, anxiety increasing, there is a difference between groups. So for example, for white students, non-suicidal self-injury and symptoms of eating disorders have increased tremendously since 2013, since the Healthy Mind Network has been conducting this longitudinal research in partnership with Boston University. But we also know that depression, anxiety, and other suicidal ideation and other mental health issues have been increasing in the other groups, such as our Indigenous students, non-white students, and minorities. So when we are looking at the students' challenges, it's like looking at this, this screen. You know, there's so many little pieces that come to create this kaleidoscope of what is it, what are the students' challenges during, and I'm a little bit too optimistic here, yes, I know, post-COVID-19 pandemic. We don't know what post looks like yet. We're hoping that we can shape our ideas and preparations about what post will look like based on experiences from previous traumatic events in history. but we still don't know that, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. When we're looking at challenges, I would say that the challenges that our students are facing today fall in three major categories. Number one, it's physical challenges or social challenges. Number two would be emotional challenges. So more of the emotional, psychological aspect of things. And number three, and this is not necessarily in the order in which I'm going to talk about, are educational challenges. So let's start with the ones that can overwhelm everything else. When we have physical, social challenges, this is when it's hard to think about everything else, right? Or it will impact everything else. So what were some of these challenges that we have seen in the students in the past couple of years, especially, and things did not get a lot better? So when we're looking at research data that has been published in 2020, late 2020, and now the information is coming up about 2021, and hopefully in a couple of months we'll have the 2022 data. Things have improved, but very, very marginally. So we know going into this new school year that these are still some of the challenges that our students will be facing. So first and foremost, access to laptops, computers. Imagine, and some of you may not need to imagine, that you're in a family of 5 individuals who all need to be on the same computer at the same time, either for work or for school. So access to computers. There were many students that reported using their smartphones to either Zoom or do their homework on. So access to technology. Now, related to access to technology, we have connectivity. Connectivity to the internet, but also multiple users needing to be on the same bandwidth. And I'm not an IT person, okay? So I don't know a lot about this, but I do know that many families have struggled when 2 or 3 have to be on Zoom or on WebEx or other platforms. The quality of the sound, the quality of the videos goes down. Here in Chattanooga, we are very blessed to be the gig city, right? And even here we have pockets where it's hard to have that stable connectivity to the internet with multiple users, okay? So that has been another challenge, because then instructors are like, well, I want to see your face, I want to see you interact. But if there is no bandwidth to be able to do that, then we have a different challenge, right? Another challenge has been with schools closing down. A lot of students had to go home, and they did not have a quiet space to be able to study, to do their work without interruption. And not only that, but it's a matter also of privacy. So not only that, now there is no quiet space, but you're constantly interrupted by family members or by pets. I've had the privilege to meet a lot of pets these past couple of years, and I didn't mind them because I know this is life right now, right? But it's still a matter of privacy. It's a matter of this is my home and you are my work. So my home and my work now all of a sudden are intertwining. And in these privacy concerns, we have seen students sometimes apologize for their environment. And that shouldn't happen, because they may be embarrassed by the circumstances in which they might be living. Or we see family members walking in the background, and sometimes, you know, they don't realize that they are seen by a multitude of other people. We have seen that too. Or some students were just able to Zoom or be online for class time in their own personal bedrooms, in their personal space. And again, it has to do with this issue of privacy and being able to understand that, hey, this is now my space. Do I invite you into my space? Can I invite you into my space without being judged? The other tremendous challenge, over 70% of the students in a very large survey, over 500,000 students, 550,000 students were interviewed from about 530 institutions in the US. Surveyed, not interviews, I'm sorry. And over 70% of them have mentioned this next challenge, and that is having to take care of families. Now, taking care of parents sometimes who are now stuck at home, right? But also taking care of their children and their children's educational needs. And that has been a tremendous challenge, because that takes away from the time that one might have for their own studies. As we continue, we see other challenges such as job loss. 42% of the respondents in that large study has lost part-time jobs, and 31% have lost full-time jobs. And I think the biggest concern that we have, especially from an educational institution point of view, is lack of access to basic needs. Because we think education, right? The title, the core of this presentation is students' needs. So when we think students, yes, we think of individuals, but we think of them in the context of an educational environment. And yet, many of them have been struggling with access to basic needs. What's a basic need? Let's try to define that a little bit. It encompasses several aspects. Number one is access to nutritious and sufficient food, a safe, secure, and adequate housing, in which a student can sleep, study, cook, and shower. Okay, so you see, it's not about sleeping, but it's more than that in terms of housing for basic needs. Another aspect of basic need is having healthcare that would promote sustained mental and physical well-being. Affordable technology, we already covered that one a little bit. Transportation, resources for personal hygiene, and childcare related issues. So when we're looking at basic needs, we look at all of these together, and I will separate a couple of them that I believe have had great impact for our students. And those are, number one is food insecurity. When we look at food, lack of nutritious, adequate food will lead to poor concentration, poor health outcomes. So somebody who's hungry will not be able to focus in class or write a quality paper for that matter. Nearly 3 in 5 students have experienced basic needs insecurity, and 40% were affected by food insecurity. When we think about 550, more than 550, but let's think 550,000 respondents, 40% of that is what, about 300,000 thereabout, if not more or less. That's a lot of students facing food insecurity. Out of all of these, almost half, well, they're in between, because the ranges is 48% was at 2-year colleges and 59% at 4-year colleges. So those are the wide, you will see ranges. But half of those faced high levels of food insecurity. So we're not talking about, oh, I didn't have something to eat that I really wanted, such as, oh, go to Chick-fil-A or Starbucks, right? We're talking about high levels of food insecurity. And to some degree, you know, looking at that pan over there, that yes, you have a couple of carrots, a couple of potatoes, and a celery, or I think that's a celery, if not a leek. But how much can you use this to feed your family and have a nutritious meal? Housing insecurity. We have seen housing insecurity in our students, and we know that there were a lot of communities that have eviction prevention programs. And here in Chattanooga, we've been blessed by that. But overall, our students have been facing this housing insecurity. When will that end? When will that end? 48% of the students have been affected by housing insecurity. Almost 30% could not pay utility bills or the full amount of rent. So now all of a sudden you see that couch surfing that's happening when people are taking in others, family members usually and friends, so that they can make up what's lacking, if at all possible. But there's always that fear of what's coming. And that what's coming was actually a rise in homelessness amongst college students. 13% of the students were affected by homelessness. They moved in with someone else. Okay. 7 to 10% lived with others in locations, in apartments or homes, beyond the expected capacity of the home. So when we're thinking homelessness, I can talk to you about what we understand by homelessness and how the law defines homelessness and what resources are there for the homeless individuals in our communities. And it's hard to see homelessness in our students. Just the other day, I was in a presentation and someone mentioned that there is an increase in students wanting to live on campus, in campus housing. Now, that is in direct response to what happened in 2020 when students had to go home and they had no home to go to because their home was the dorm or a student housing at universities or at colleges. So when we're talking about homelessness, the closure of the dorms really has impacted a lot of students. And we are just now beginning to realize how much, because we see the flip side, we see the demand coming back. I already mentioned the closure of the dorms. Now, the other part of it has been the fact that not everybody experienced the same thing at the same time. Okay. The black-white gap in basic needs and security was 16 percentage points. So if you think about, let's say, rounded up to 50%, everybody who identified as white was facing basic needs insecurity. Minorities, indigenous, Black students, African-American, Black, they were 16% above that. That's 66%. That's a huge jump. 64 to 60% of the first generation students or Pell Grant recipients, they have experienced the highest disparities in these basic needs insecurity. And these are the students without resources, okay? And we don't know them. We see them in class, but we don't know what's beyond that educational piece. And that's why it's so important to understand where is it that we are and recognize that our students have needs beyond that. 52% of the students did not apply for emergency aid because they didn't know how to do that. And here, we can blame a lot of people, but we can see also that universities, many times, they didn't know what to, campus resources, they didn't know what to tell students, you go here or you apply there. So can we blame it on society as a whole? I don't know. But to see that half of students who needed help could not get it, it was quite hard. Let's move now into a little bit of the educational challenges, because we see everything that's going on at home in personal life, but let's look at how is that impacting education. Well, first and foremost, the change to online has been hard for many to adapt. They didn't have any prior practice. They didn't have any prior experience with online learning. And that goes for both students and instructors, because instructors didn't know now how to respond to student needs. okay? They added information that needed to be completed because, hey, we're not in class, so you should have time now to check out all these resources and read all this extra or do all this extra assignments, without realizing that added extra stress on students, because we always say, minimize your screen time, right? That's the first thing that we tell when someone is struggling a little bit with depression or anxiety. This couldn't happen, right? Because we as instructors may not have been prepared, all of us prepared for that. The lack of interaction, that of understanding of materials and exchanging ideas, that led to loneliness. Not only loneliness as human beings, but loneliness in completing assignments. No longer students had that opportunity to be able to exchange ideas with one another, or even ask questions. It's one thing to ask a question when you're in person, because you can kind of whisper it and it's out in the air. The air will take the question away. But when you have to write it down, many students have encountered, let's call it shyness, or fear of being ashamed of asking questions that perhaps sounded, hey, this is a stupid question. And I've heard that so much in the last couple of years. Oh, can I ask you a stupid question? There is no stupid question. I can give a stupid answer, yes, absolutely. But no question is stupid, but students will feel that way in an environment where there's little interaction, or even little promotion of interaction. That also matters quite a bit. And of course, learning management system challenges. You know, each course looked different. So in which course do I look for assignments here versus there? That created a lot of challenges in terms of frustration and knowing how to and when to complete assignments. And that's consistency across the courses. Now let's move a little bit into emotional challenges, because this is something that we have seen, and campuses across the nation have responded to this. Emotional challenges. We have seen a lot of increase in depression, anxiety, especially as related to struggling to concentrate on assignments. I mentioned at the beginning suicidal ideation. I mentioned family issues. One of the positives, if we can call it positive, from this experience has been that a lot of the stigma related to mental health has eased a little bit. So we now talk a little bit more about mental health, and we feel comfortable talking about mental health. However, the negative of it is that many, and students are included here because the survey was done with students, they use their family, their friends, or their romantic partners to talk about their mental health problems. So instead of seeking formal support, which was seen as perhaps unavoidable, unattainable, they turned to their family members who may not have been equipped to deal with such things. So it added, if you wish, to the collective social trauma that we have been experiencing in the last few years. And then we have seen an increase in abuse and neglect, both child abuse and domestic violence. And this is where the Family Justice Center has been tremendously helping individuals, not only with awareness, but in resources to be able to provide and close the gap. 75 to 78% of those involved with the foster care or justice system as related to children, they experience the highest basic need insecurity. So when we think about the relationship between basic need and everything else, I think that's all we have to read right there. 75 to 78%. That's a tremendous number. COVID-19 brought a host of other emotional challenges, losses, you know, family members, friends who were sick, family members or loved ones dying of COVID-19. And this 13% is based on the 2020 and 2021, which is the most recent data that has been published on students out there. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the 2022 data, which hopefully it's looking a little bit better. And as I mentioned at the beginning, students of color and minorities have been disproportionately impacted. The difference in percentage points is tremendous, okay? It's between 10 and 20%, almost 20%. So now as we are coming through this pandemic and it's ongoing and hopefully out of it, I'm wondering how is this going to impact the anxiety, not only related to course completion, but about society in general. How are we changing? What's the new normal? What does social distancing mean? Do I need a mask? When do I need a mask? How do I relate to others who perhaps are wearing one or are not wearing one, and I'm the one wearing one? So now we have a whole new area of challenges related to anxiety and social anxiety. And all of this has a ripple effect, not only on and among students, but to faculty and staff members who have been trying to cater to the educational needs of the students. But as we have seen, is that not only we have been called to respond to educational needs, but also to emotional needs. Students needed flexible and understanding faculty. When we ourselves as faculty members, staff members needed that flexibility. We were trying to figure out how to solve students' problems with technology when we ourselves were struggling. So now we have a ripple and double effect on the faculty and staff members who have been trying to respond to students' needs and their own needs. And we have been called like never before to provide emotional support to our students while perhaps going through similar or the same challenges as our students were going through, but didn't have the time, the opportunity, or even perhaps access to enough resources, especially time-wise and access-wise, to seek out someone else. And when I say access is that I'm referring to the fact that our campus resources, most campus resources nationwide, have turned their almost exclusive focus to the students. Priority was the students. So a faculty member or a staff member will always put the students' needs first. So access then to other outside resources was like just an extra burden, forget about it, okay? The shortest road is the one that you know best, right? So if you can't take the shortest road to a resource, you may give up. The other aspect that has impacted faculty and staff was accessibility. Students needed access to their faculty or staff members online during their time. So like never before, we have seen extended office hours into the evening. Like never before, we have seen faculty members answer text messages where before you never gave out your cell number, right? But during the pandemic, and this was commented in one of the webinars I attended this summer about students' challenges. Excuse me for a moment. Professors at large public universities, where you have 300, 400, 500, 600 students in a program, trying to respond to text messages that students are asking questions, or they just need someone to know about their situation. So all of the student issues have had ripple effect on faculty and staff. Students now, we see that they desire this convenience and flexibility of online education. We have seen this constantly, and programs are trying to respond to that. But there are some challenges and some opportunities in this. Let's start with the challenges so we can get those out of the way, right? Oh, for some reason, this doesn't want to come up. So the challenges that we have seen, and students are feeling this, is creating a sense of community and engagement in the classroom. Creating consistency across courses when you have individual professors with different levels of proficiency in working with technology. And also providing enough support. And when I'm talking about support, I'm talking about, yes, emotional support. I'm talking about IT support. I'm talking about what kind of other needs our students may have when we're talking about online education. And again, depending on where you live, we had students who lived, as we might call it, in the middle of nowhere, and they had to travel and stay in their car during lectures or class time, just so that they can have access to perhaps a Starbucks or another store that has wireless access. So they would sit in the parking lot in their car trying to be connected to the internet. What kind of support can we have for this type of situations? The good news is that 64% of the students believe that faculty did support their learning. And that makes my heart happy. I wish still that the number would be higher, right? But even the little drop helps. And that's good to know. 56% of the students said that they felt the support from their campus. Again, perhaps not the high number that I was hoping for, but it's still more than half of the students felt that. And that's good because campuses have been trying to provide that support. And 50% of the students felt that they had the support they needed from their peers. And this is, I put this under challenge because all of these, while they're good news, there's still more work to do in these areas. Now, what are some of the opportunities? Students have been developing, because of online learning, they have been developing very important hard skills. How do you manage your time and projects? And of course, career-specific tasks. Okay, we all know that. But they also have been developing and learning more about the soft skills: accountability, communication, adaptability. How do you function in an online environment? Nowadays, very few institutions will have primary interviews with candidates in person. You may have 2 or 3 interviews online before, if you're lucky enough to go through the stages, before you're even invited in an institution. So how do we teach our students how to function, how to present themselves well in an online environment, especially in a working situation? The other opportunity that we have seen is that students are starting to be more focused on the importance of life and doing life. Before, yes, I would hear students talk about time off or taking time for themselves or things like that. But since the pandemic started, I have heard much more about, I need time for my relationships. I need time for my education. I need time for my mental health. I'm going to make changes to my health and diet, exercise. I've seen that and heard that in our classrooms constantly. So this is not only research-based, but it's also what we have seen in our classrooms in terms of students reporting what were some of these benefits. We realize that it can provide a lot of loneliness. So now how can we provide resilience? How can we jump back from that loneliness? And students have been focusing on those aspects. So where are we headed? It's hard to tell, right? Research from 9/11, from the Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina, we know that, especially from 9/11, it took about almost 10 years for people to be able to get back to a pre-event normal. So it took a lot of years, especially in New York City, in New Jersey. And when we're talking about those directly affected, it took more intense work. So first responders and so on, 20 years later, they're still struggling with some things. So when we look at it, the pandemic lasted or is lasting much more than a few days, a few hours. So we don't know what the impact is going to be yet. I loved this quote from one of the articles that I read. The new normal will be quite different from anything that we have known before. So how can we prepare for the unknown? Well, yes, we always look at the past, right? A little bit to teach us what worked in the past so that we can somehow, somewhat prepare for the future. And there, I would say about 4 aspects, and I have 4 aspects on the screen for you that would help us to not only understand, but develop this holistic view of what are our students' needs, what are their challenges, and how can we focus on their well-being. Number 1, continue to destigmatize mental health problems. This is very important, and especially in this conversation of destigmatizing mental health, also promoting the benefits of formal interventions such as counseling, seeking formal help versus help from family, friends, or professors in the case of students, professors and staff members. From an institutional perspective, discuss basic needs in the enrollment process and at the beginning of their educational experience. Again, create this culture of caring, of support, of destigmatizing mental health and general basic needs challenges, and also increasing awareness of campus resources. And I would say not only campus resources, but community resources. Because in our community, for example, we have the Family Justice Center, and I saw just a little bit earlier someone for the partnership. We have that in our community, and it's a resource also for our students, not only for the community at large, because the students are part of our community, right? But we need to make more efforts in order to reach the students, increase that awareness for them, provide information for them specifically so that they know that all of these services are available to them as students. And I added there public benefits. Last year, just in our food pantry, we've been trying to help our students to apply for food stamps. And other than one person who said, yeah, I thought I would qualify, everyone else that we helped said, I didn't know that as a student I could qualify for that. So information that is specific for students, it's very important to help with relieving the basic needs, yes, but also helping to respond to the challenges that students are facing today. We don't know what the future holds, but we can prepare to the best of our ability by providing students with information, with awareness, with sometimes even the help. Hey, I'll walk you there, right? Or we can call together. It makes a difference. So at this time, I don't know if we have some time for questions or things like that. And if anyone is interested in the references for this presentation, I have a whole list of them. But if you want to know where I got all my percentages, right? So thank you for being part of this presentation and for caring about students' challenges. So any questions that there might be, and if I have an answer, I'm happy to provide it.
Yeah, we do have 15 minutes if anyone does have questions.
That's all right. It's as we are starting and we're looking at the new school year, you know, we see students starting to come on campus, and they're full of life and they're looking forward to an experience. And that's fantastic. But sometimes reality will hit. And usually it hits about week 2 and 3. That's when the reality really hits for students. How are we prepared as institutions, but also as community entities, to help the students see that they're not alone in that week 2, 3, and 4, in the dark time? Because afterwards they start to get used to things, they are learning about resources, they start accessing those resources. But what can we do to help them through those first 2, 3, 4 weeks of this new normal that some of them never experienced, and some of them are hoping for something better or something different, a new normal that we ourselves don't know what looks like, right? Thank you, Michelle. There was a comment in the chat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ricovita. We enjoyed that immensely. Thank you. Thank you. I will post this on Facebook and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to see everything that we recorded today.
Yes, absolutely. And if anyone has any questions or would like to continue the conversation, I'm happy to do so. My email address is, and I should have put it on the screen, but my email address.
You can put it on the screen or in the chat, either way.
Yes, I can put it in the chat. It's my last name, so Racovita @southern.edu. So I'm happy to continue the conversation and brainstorm ideas of how can we meet our students' challenges in a world that we don't know how to work with, right? But together we can make it happen.
Oh yes, I love a good brainstorm. Good. Thank you so much.